Good afternoon, everyone. It is Tuesday, and it's that time. It's time for the Bertie Roux podcast, and we had a very exciting and controversial topic that we were speaking about last week, and that is leadership versus management. And Bertie, we got quite a stir last week, and we got quite a bit of feedback on what we've done last week. It was quite an interesting topic to work through.
Yes, good day to everyone, and thank you for listening.
Right. So, following, and we just discussed today's topic, which is Beyondership, and we said it's a nice segue or follow up from the topic of leadership versus management. Bertie, can you explain to me? We just spoke off air, and we were looking at those three aspects. Why are they so closely tied together for you? Because I want to get into Beyondership and talk about the aspects of that. But last week we spoke of manager versus leader, and then you brought in Beyonder, which is the next level or the next step. What are your thoughts on those three being placed together?
Yeah, I want to add in followership as well, because
Okay.
that is a philosophy that I've read that people are talking about as well. You know, I always say that, and as an ex-teacher, I experienced leadership from an early part of my life as a child, as a scholar, and then as a teacher working with scholars. We always appoint leaders in this at school that sort of come out of the popular groupings in the school. You know, the prefects and those leaders are selected based on popularity and not necessarily based on ability. So what happens then, as they move into life, the concept of leadership is misunderstood. So then they enter into managerial positions, and they confuse once again management and leadership. So in my mind, simply stated, leader walks with the crowd and along with the crowd, whilst the manager has got a responsibility for an outcome. He is entrusted by senior management or the board of the company to ensure certain results. So it's very much a result driven, and therefore I believe it is a learned skill that can be taught in terms of management, what is expected from a manager in terms of organization, control, etc. But the moment you start dabbling into leadership, it's a little bit, and not a little bit, it's a lot more different. And then the levels of leadership is also different. You know, comes the opportunity, comes the crisis, a leader will come to the fore, such as we now experience with COVID and the pandemic across the world. Certain leaders come so much stronger. Um, if you take the leadership in Germany, for example, strong Merkel came through in this time. And if you think about what happened in the States in terms of Donald Trump, how, in inverted commas, how poor he is perceived to have managed the COVID crisis. Both of them are leaders. Both of them have been appointed as leaders for very large and influential countries in the world. One successful, another less. So it stands to be seen the end result, I must add. So leadership can be different. So when it comes to opportunity, a leader should come to the fore. And it's not necessarily the leader that has been selected and is in the chair at the moment. If I take the leadership into organizations, that also happens in organizations, because there's a certain stage in organization development that they require the input and the involvement and the entrusted um, leadership from a different kind of leader. So an organization in the growth phase has got a specific kind of leader. They require that, and it's necessary to have that person as a leader. But if that leader overstays his welcome, or her welcome for that matter, they can take the organization as fast up as they did down as well, because a change leader requires constant change. So it doesn't allow the organization to stable off and to get the processes stabilized and working properly before the next uplift in the organization. So they create change where change at that time might not be necessary. So then the momentum up is also the momentum that goes down. So that means that when the company is in a maintenance phase, they need different kind of leadership in that organization. So and that is crucial that we understand the difference, and that's why it's so controversial that people confuses management and leadership all the time, according to my definition. If you Google that and you get the definitions, they are sometimes very much the same, and a lot of people talk about management out of the same breath as leadership. When we then talk about followership, that is where the reference are really made to a leader having earned the right to lead. And that's why people will be willing to follow them. I mean, we can say a lot about Adolf Hitler, but masses were following him. He was charismatic. Was he correct in our views? No, he wasn't. But he managed to get the masses to follow him blindly. Follow did things by our definition is completely wrong, but he earned the right to lead, even though his upbringing is mediocre. It's nothing to be happy about, and be proud about. And he ended up in it. So was he a good leader? Was he a bad leader? The fact that he was able to get the masses to follow him tells me that he was a good leader because people followed him. And by the definition, that is why we talk about followership. You might have a leader in your organization that nobody respects enough to follow, but he's still an appointed leader.
I'm glad you brought up Trump because I wanna ask you a couple of questions about him. So number one, looking at the entire Trump story, would you consider him to be a beyonder? Because I think you need to be pretty special to become the leader of the free world. Obviously, he's got this business background, billionaire, reality shows, those kind of things. And now he's got this, he went into the seat of the leader of the free world. Do you think that a president or someone that's in that seat is an exceptional human being or a beyonder?
Now, I won't consider Trump to be a beyonder. Because I mean, there's to me that leaders who aspire to be beyonders possess and radiate different sets, a deep-seated vision. And I don't know whether Trump really had a deep-seated vision for the country, other than building a wall. And then also that beyondership is anchored in a clear set of values. Now, lots of us, it's challenging Trump's values. And I must immediately say, I'm a South African. What I know about what happens in the States is what I read from the newsprint or on the TV. And we know a lot of those are stories that sells because it sounds nice and it's not necessarily facts. I also have some friends that has been very staunch Trump followers and even supported his campaigns actively. And according to them, Trump did a lot of great things in America that made a difference to the economy and to people's lives. Because remember, there was a time that America also went through close to recession, where people had tough times. They couldn't pay their bonds anymore. They were foreclosed, lost their properties, and unemployment rose. So things wasn't so good. And then all of a sudden, Trump came in and he created change. The economy came back. The stock exchange really did well, one of the high flyers in the world. But still, I wouldn't consider him a beyonder, because a beyonder is really somebody that comes to the fore and tread where others don't, and won't risk to tread. It's a fine line to become a beyonder. Now, I'd see um, Trump, for that matter, as a leader. He is a good businessman. He had his ups and downs as well in terms of his history, as best as I know. And he's still out there and he's still doing well. But has he really gained the trust of the American people? Yes, there was very much a 50-50, almost in terms of the millions that voted between him and Biden. But he lost enough seats not to be able to become the new elected or the re-elected president. Was that based on his popularity, whether or on his effectiveness as a good leader, and therefore, may I say, a beyonder? I think it was popularity that, at the end of the day, cost him his presidency and not his leadership. If he was an effective leader, he would have had them to follow him, and the followers would have been loyal and supporting him, and he would have had the followership.
We're always talking about things like foresight, Bertie. Let's apply some hindsight in the case of Trump. Don't you think that obviously there's a big risk in being a leader, because when you lead, you will always be criticized for what you're doing. It doesn't matter if you've done great things. There will always be, that adage of the highest trees catch the most wind, and so there'll always be criticism for that. And he's obviously had probably the most difficult tail end of his presidency, because he had to navigate America through the COVID period, and that's one of the things that a lot of my associates in the leadership field have been focusing on a lot the last couple of months, is leading through a crisis. So my question is, when you're a leader, is that comes with the territory? You always have criticism from people, and then what does it take to lead through a crisis, and will that make you a beyonder?
As I say, deep-seated value is what's important. If you stand your ground, whether you are right or wrong doesn't matter. There will always be people that say that you are right and more right, or left and therefore wrong and more wrong. So that's the same with followers. You've got followers, you don't. So, but you must stand your ground. The way I see the things that panned out with Donald Trump is that people lost the trust that they have in him. He must have made decisions that they did not support. And the moment the emotions become close to your body, and you start losing friends and family because of a pandemic like this, you need to blame somebody. And Trump is, from a leadership point of view, is very much into hiring and firing. He's known for that. His TV program was very much in that, you fired, and there's no explanation. And his position that he filled in the White House was very much the same. We heard constantly about people that were simply just fired because they didn't agree with Trump. I would have considered him a beyonder if he understood the risk associated with not just leading the country, but leading the country through this pandemic, and associated himself and appointed, therefore, trusted people that to support him, people that not necessarily think like him, and preferably did not think like him, because that is also a very key point that we will find in a beyonder, is that they got the ability to select and surround themselves with highly effective people to make them much more effective. And from a leadership point of view, that is key. And Trump, to my mind, appointed a lot of controversial people continuously around him. And the moment people ended up disliking those people, he would replace them with even bigger controversial people. So, and I think as one of the things that he failed in most is surrounding him with trusted people that shared his values, but not necessarily his beliefs, because they were appointed to differ from him because he cannot know everything. He's the leader of a team that he appointed and selected. And he, to my mind, failed that. And that's one of the points where he lost popularity, because he lost people's trust, that they could trust him to take them through this pandemic. And that was for the opposition. And it's so easy to discredit Trump and his followers because of that. Because they would have probably have made exactly the same mistakes, might even have made more mistakes. Because what did we know? How did we know this will pan out? We got no idea. So from that point of view, if he appointed people around him that supported him and carried him through this pandemic, I would have considered him a beyonder, beyond any doubt. But he did not do that, according to my view.
Before we go into, I want to segue into the Beyonder conversation, but I want to talk quickly about, you mentioned something before, and I see it quite often in leadership where someone is in a leadership position and they are so enamored with the position and the feeling of power that what happens is they eventually overstay their welcome. So talk to me about that concept of overstaying your welcome as a leader. So you were appointed, you're a good leader, but there are seasons in leadership. So there's a time when you've kind of done what you could do, and now it's time to hand over. We see that often in presidential candidates where they don't hand over, and now it becomes almost a dictatorial relationship. So talk to me about overstaying your welcome, and how do you know it's time for you to hand over to someone else?
I've alluded to it just now in terms of when we think about companies in different phases, where they go through, growth and maturity, and then growth and maturity again, leveling off. During that stages, they need different kind of leadership to take them through that. So leaders in themselves prefer to think in certain ways. If we just think about brain profiling and we think about left brain and right brain, we will also get the answer there. So where's the visionary thinker, the creative thinker, the guys with more courage? Because that also is two key elements of beyondership versus transformational. It is whether creativity is the key or courage is the key. In transformation, I see courage is the key, because you need to be willing, and there must be a desire to change and be better, and then the creativity follows after that. But in beyondership, the creative, in other words, you see and believe and do things just different from others. Okay, so overstaying your welcome, I would consider in that, how do you lead the organization? If you're a president or a leader of a corporate or then of a country, as an effective leader, let's call you then a beyonder, you would have surrounded you with people that will take the country through these different, same type of growth phases, because countries go through that as well. Economies tend to grow and turn around and need some impetus or somebody to pick them up and grow them again. So it's difficult so the concept of overstaying your welcome, it's certainly in a political environment is linked to popularity. As long as the masses are comfortable with you as a person, and therefore that I can trust you as my leader because I like you, what you stand for, what you represent in terms of your values and your beliefs. I will follow you because I know that your party will and should have the drive to take us through the ups and downs of economies or political playing fields or whatever the case may be. In small organizations, it becomes less easy because the leader often has a managerial role as well. So they have to roll up their sleeves and dirty their hands. So if they overstay their welcome, they can manage the organization to an early death, which often happens. And they don't even know that. Because at the end of the day, they have surrounded themselves with like-minded people because that's easier to manage like-minded people because they think like me, so I can entrust them and I can macro manage them because they think like me. But for the existence and the future of the organization, and that's where the Beyondership comes in terms of leadership, is what is the company going to do after next year, the year thereafter, and the year thereafter? Who brings in the vision with imagination? Not the existing people. And if everybody thinks alike, they would make the same decisions in terms of where the company would be tomorrow. So their strategic plans will take them from where they are at the moment and in the baby steps take them forward, where different thinking teams will take the companies in quantum leaps and grow them somewhere else. And I would say, in terms of political view and therefore and corporates, that's the same viewpoint they should have. So the overstaying your welcome would be small organizations. And I've read a lot about companies that has that philosophy in organization, that they replace their senior management and leadership or CEOs in organization on a regular basis. 6 months like that, maximum in one spot. They might stay in the same organization, but they are moved out of this organization and shifted across the ocean to another group overseas, so that they can not just grow and develop, but also that they don't enforce their thinking on this organization and stagnate the organization, because that can happen, because that is the impact of a leader. And if they're charismatic, they will have the followership, and all of them will together follow each other over the cliff, and the company goes bang. So that's high risk, and I think that's what you probably refer to as overstay my welcome. I've overstayed my welcome to the extent that I have managed the organization into the ground. I never saw that there's daylight in the other side of the hill. I didn't think like a beyonder. I didn't have the courage and the creativity to go beyond what I know and what I've experienced up to date. You muted?
Okay, we've delved between that relationship between a leader and a beyonder. Can we start delving into the beyonder for a moment? Let's talk about when we met, you spoke about this quite passionately. Give me, what does a beyonder look like, just for the audience so that they know what we're talking about? What does a beyonder look like? Who is a beyonder?
That's where I sorry that I'm looking down. It is difficult to say who is a beyonder, because the concept of beyondership is the difference between a leader in a maintenance environment and in a growth environment. That beyonder has got the ability, when he or she gets to the end of a road, or can limit it their beliefs by the horizon, to go beyond that. And that is why I talk about bird's eye view. That's got the ability to elevate themselves away from any challenge and problem, and either then appoint and group people around them to take the organization somewhere, or else in themselves can think beyond the limitations that is set by everybody else. So they are the person that get there and do something different, completely should lifestyle. I mean, like Elon Musk, in terms of he personifies a beyond. If I think if one go back a couple of years in his life and interview and ask him, did you think about these things when you were a scholar or at university or even when you moved to America? He would not be able to. But he has the ability to not be impeded by those things that human put in front of them and the limitations that bring to them. Just go beyond that. Their view is just completely different. And it's so different. That's why I say that beyondership, it comes from within. Um, it's a belief and a trust in yourself that nothing is impossible. People that be able to ask the what if question all the time and not be limited by saying, no, I can't. And if there's ever a challenge put to them, the beyonder, and the answer come from them, no, I can't, then they will immediately follow it up with, yet, I cannot do it yet. That's a differentiator. When I can't, yet, I know I'm going to. I'll find a way. I have the ability, but I'm limited to my thinking and my belief.
So, if you were to list any your say top 5 or top 10 beyonders, so that people can get an example of who these kind of individuals are. You've mentioned Elon Musk before. Who else is on your top 5 or top 10 beyonder list?
You know that's a challenge in terms of remembering all the names and so forth. You must understand. Sometimes that proves too. But you know, Richard Branson, for example, to my mind, is very much the same. He's also not limited by any limiting beliefs. He just believes that he can. Nobody will be able to tell him he can't. You know, there's so you put me on the spot, and I'm it's a pity I can't answer that question here and now. But you know, I would add Nelson Mandela as a beyond thinker. Um, you know, there's people that was just not limited. So let me stop there, because there's, I mean, people that that started, let's say, Apple, companies, big organizations, and what they have done and how they've grown and not limited. We can say on the other side the negatives of people that were limited in terms of how they viewed cell phones, cellular phones, and cameras, for that matter. So there's a lot of, I mean, the starters of Google, and we think of in China that couldn't find a job even as as a a cleaner, and is one of is a multi-billionaire today, starting his own businesses out in China. So it's those people that just have the persistence as part of their DNA. Doesn't matter what is put in their way, they find a way around it, over it, and through it. And there's not that stop. That's all. So in our own sense, we can think about it as, you know, there's people that is born with disabilities, and if you think what they have achieved and in life, and you look back and you're saying, what a beyonder, because they are not normal in our sense. To them, they are not abnormal. They are able people, just differently put together. And those are principles that I would like to add to and say that to me is a differentiator of beyond that.
Now you were talking about a beyonder having out of the box thinking. Let's talk a little bit about how a beyonder approaches life. What that again will speak to kind of how can we identify them? How can we become one? is looking at these approaches too, because thought is a big part of what you're trying to convey in your messaging. Let's talk a little bit about the Beyonders thought process. How do they approach things? How are they thinking about things?
One of the things I've just spoken about, to them, everything is possible, because to them, nothing is impossible. Their impossible is just a bigger challenge in terms of their reference. So they are not stopped at all by any limiting beliefs. So, to my mind, those are the people that create environments that inspire passion and perseverance until the goals are reached. And that's why I'm saying, if it's to be impossible in other people by anybody else's definition, they will break that up in elements and say, what if I can do that? What if that's possible? And if that is possible, what if this is possible? And so they would have in their terminology and in their vocabulary, what if all the time? Not to stop and saying, I understand that you say it's not possible, you can't do this, you cannot do that, but let's just for 1 minute challenge ourselves and say, what if it was possible? What if you could have done it? How would you feel that if that was possible? And the moment you go that way, that this integration of you, that the answers that comes from inside you, that I'm saying the answers come from within. The moment you ask yourself the what if question, you are forced to give an answer because you're not under pressure now. I mean, so I said it's impossible. And if somebody challenged me, what if it's possible? You say, then going to Mars is possible. I can grow vegetables there. There would be water there. I can live there. And all of a sudden, you are giving the possible answers to the impossible question that you got at the beginning. And you will also, in your vocabulary, as I said just now, add the little word, 3-letter word yet, that you're saying, it's not possible yet, or I don't answer, I don't know yet. I will find a way. And that will be the thinking of Beyonder, because the natural response to the bulk of people out there, when they hit a challenge, they will turn around, not find another way, but just find another path. They won't go this path that they actually set themselves, because there's too much trouble in there. They can't think beyond this. So they don't have the ability to ask that question and say, what if I can? What if I can float like a bird in the sky and see everything from the sky out there and getting the big picture, and then make my decisions based on the big picture and not just on the picture of where I'm at the moment, little baby steps going forward. So that's crucial. Just now we mentioned about, when we spoke about the politicians or whatever, for the Beyonder, it's not to be the best in the world, but the best for the world. That is why the Beyonder, in terms of when you ask me, challenge me, Bertie, who we consider Beyonders, they are not just people that's looked after themselves. They've got a wider vision and mission for themselves in terms of where they want to go. You challenge them in terms of why they do what they do, the way they do it, they will answer you, because it's for the wider good of the country or for the world. And if the politician can adopt that standpoint, by that definition, Beyonder, it's not about him. It's not about her party. It's about what is the best for the people of my country. What is the best for the people of my organization, my company? You muted again.
We had conversations on both these statements before. So what I want to ask you is to put these against each other and talk about them. So I think often a Beyonder would say the impossible is possible. And then there's the flip side of that we had conversations about as well, and that is reality. For instance, I want to play first Springbok rugby, but I don't have, my one leg has been amputated. Can you talk to us about those two different concepts? The one where the Beyonders say the impossible is possible, but also facing reality on the other side.
Absolutely. We must understand that perception becomes your fact, and your fact becomes your reality. But it still starts off with a perception. And then we must add to that perception belief. And it's quite right. There's so many people that start out with wanting to do the impossible, not necessarily the improbable, but the impossible. It's like having an ambition that you want to play for the national team, the kind of sports, but you are not able to do that. You may have just one leg, but that should not be your limitation, because your desire to play a sport for your country, that is the desire. You must just find the sport that suits your abilities in terms of your inabilities, for that matter. And I think I just want to share this example again to answer your question. Many years back, I did a one-day training program at a boys' town. Now, a boys' town is where a lot of challenged kids end that has been put there under protection and under control of senior people, and taken out people that has done wrongs. They've hurt people. They've attacked or murdered kids and people. So it's let's almost call them then outcasts, because they are short of going to jail. And I spoke to these kids, and there was a lot of animosity when I started, because what is this guy come and talk to us about future plans and abilities and wishes and dreams? But as the day progressed, they started opening up, because the one thing that I wanted to share with them is that if they want to do something, they can. Doesn't matter what is their background. And one of the kids, very aggressively, when I asked him what is his plans and how he sees his future, he said, but he wanted to go to the Olympics. I asked him, now, what sport do you do? None, nothing whatsoever. He doesn't play sport and never has. And I said to him, don't you think that the Olympics is there for sports people to challenge one another to become and prove to be the best? He agreed to that, and that was part of his aggression. So I said, okay, fine. Let's elaborate on this a little bit. What do you love doing? What is your passion? Where does it lie? What's your interest? And he said, I enjoy photography. And I said, aha. Don't you think you can go to the Olympics as a photographer? And the moment I started with that discussion of going to the Olympics as a photographer, it is as if everything fell off his face and he became a different person. Because all of a sudden he realized that everything is possible. But you must just define what you are good at, what you love doing, then everything is possible. So I can be associated with national sports, but maybe not necessarily as one of the competitors, but of the sports staff, and in this case, going to Olympics as a photographer, as a freelance or a contracted photographer for a newspaper or periodicals, or just somebody who wanted to publish books. And the moment you think like that, that is beyond the thinking as well, is to go beyond the limitations of saying, I want to go there as a sportsman because I believe only sports people go to the Olympics. And we are so wrong. But that's how we go through life. We define that, and that becomes our limiting factors. And we don't go beyond that. And somebody just breaks this for us and open the floodgate, and we go and we see that we are able to live our dreams. Those visions that we have for ourselves is all possible and all from within. It's here already. But it's a matter of, do I know what I don't know? Or don't I know what I do know?
So one question I want to ask you, Bertie, is very, very, very important. And a couple of conversations that we had tie into this. Questions like, can I teach you to become a Beyonder? How do you become a Beyonder? But answer that question for me. Can I become a Beyonder? Anybody that's listening.
I believe you can. And I would answer this two ways. Dr. Kobus Neethling, the founder of Neethling Brain Instruments here in South Africa, has got a program. And if you are very much interested in Beyondership, becoming a Beyonder, there's courses and programs that you can go through that is presented by them, by the NBI, Neethling Brain Instruments. And you could therefore be taught to become a Beyonder. But I also believe that you can be a Beyonder by just changing your mindset, that everything is possible until proven impossible. Because that is a mindset that goes with Beyondership. So you can, by merely changing your mindset, you can come be Beyonder. So the leader out there must just understand what is his role. And then ask himself the question, what role do I really want to adopt for me as a leader? Am I a leader by definition, a glorified manager, put into control of an organization to manage the day-to-day organization of the company and the processes for specific outcomes as defined and by maybe the shareholders for that matter? Or am I really a leader that has earned the right to be followed by my team, and I will take this organization beyond everybody and anybody's expectation? Do I know where I can lead this organization to? No, I don't. And that's another key element of Beyondership, is that courage to go where nobody else have dared to go. Because that is the Beyonder, not stopping, but going beyond that. And paving the future of the organization as a leader of that organization. And just that mindset that everything is possible. And sometimes when people talk to me about it, is that it goes with belief. As I said, it's courage, but it goes with the self-belief. And do you have that? Or do you just need some help to push you in the right direction? That is why I believe so many people has got coaches that get involved in their lives, because, as I say, what you want to become, your passions and your future and your dreams is already embedded in you. You just need to bring them out. I read a story today about a Buddha sign that the monks were under attack there in Thailand, and they knew this Buddha, they have something like quite a heavy Buddha just made of gold. So they went and they covered in mud and ceramics, and they created a very ugly statue out of this gold Buddha statue. And in the attack from the outsiders, every one of them, of the monks, were killed. So there was nobody to say that inside this ugly thing, there's the gold. And many, many, many years later, after this thing was moved outside somewhere else, they wanted to move it away, take it away, and they used the crane, and the chains broke because of the weight. Nobody knew it was so heavy. And when it hit the ground, it chipped off, and there was this Buddha, the gold Buddha, that can be seen in Thailand now. We sometimes need somebody to chip away all these fronts that we hide behind, because either we're scared to let go, or we're insecure to let go, or we simply don't know what our capabilities are. We sometimes just need that. And that's where, for example, a coach will come in and just help you through this, because Beyondership is not that easy. You've got to believe yourself and have the courage to believe, and then just do it.
As we end off, Bertie, can you, if I have this desire to become a Beyonder or just go to the next level in my life, what is the first next step that I have to take?
To my mind, you need to have a clear, defined vision of your perceived future, because that will pull you through your limiting thoughts to where you want to become. So that impossible imagined vision that you create for yourself would be something that would need to be your first step, because Beyondership is not taking baby steps; it's taking quantum leaps. Quantum leaps in
Wow.
terms of believing that I can actually create the impossible and do the impossible. And that needs, there you need some help and support. And that's the first step on my mind, is a clear, defined vision created with imagination.
Can you say that one quote for me again? I loved it, and I think some people might not heard the whole thing. Just you said something like, "A Beyonder is not about taking baby steps; it's about taking quantum leaps." Just repeat that for us again.
That's absolutely, as I say, if a Beyonder will go where nobody else went before, and that implies not taking baby steps, not being cautious. They will jump and just go for it, irrespective. So that means I must take quantum leaps. So I create the future, because I have created the future through the clarity of my defined future that I created. So I'm starting to live in the here and now, my future. So I jump to my future and I start living in my future, which sometimes is at this stage still imaginary and impossible and improbable. But I'm start living it, and as the clarity comes through, I pull my here and now closer, and that is why you take baby steps to achieve your dreams. You take quantum leaps, because your dreams should be that far that you can't reach them with baby steps.
That's phenomenal. Bertie, any final thoughts on Beyondership or anything that we spoke of today before we sign off?
Sometimes even myself, when I talk about the concept of Beyondership, I I struggle to define, and some of you might have said, but you can't really put your hands and around who is a beyonder. That is exactly that. If I put a beyonder in a box, then the whole concept of beyondership would disappear, because beyondership is something so new that I can't think about it now until I've moved there and experienced it. And that is key to beyondership and beyonderness, is the uncertainty that I move into, and then the willingness and the courage that I have to step where nobody else had dared to step before. But I had the courage and the self-belief that I'll make it work.
Patty, I want to end off with a statement that might lead us into our next talk next week. By your mind, what is the definition of a legend for you?
I think every single one of us would one day like to be referred to a person that made a difference. And I think I want to use this phrase around what they say of a beyonder. Because for a beyonder, it's not about being the best in the world. It's being the best for the world. And that's my definition, is the legend. It's somebody that is linked to achievements beyond imagination. And Nelson Mandela, for example.
So I'm just thinking out loud here. I'm thinking a beyonder is someone that might currently be alive and functioning and doing what he's doing, and he's obviously an exceptional human being. But a legend is going to be someone that was a beyonder He's now passed on, and now people are talking about him kind of like folklore and referring to him as, and that's where the legend kind of story comes from.
How do you differentiate between that? You know, um, if we think about Maradona, that has recently passed away, to very many people, he would be a legend, considered to be one of the greatest footballers of forever. I mean, he did just a great footballer, and he's passed away. So I would define him now as a legend. But even while he was still alive and not playing soccer anymore, or football for that matter, he was still a legend in my eyes. So a legend doesn't have to be dead to be a legend, and a Beyonder
That's
doesn't have to be dead either to be considered a change agent for that matter to be as Beyonder.
So would you consider then, and can we conclude that a Beyonder is would be a living legend? Because there's that term that people use.
It could be that he's still alive. Remember, the Beyonder is making the changes now and he's living those changes. And in some cases, he is by definition a Beyonder and hasn't been proved to be a Beyonder. Because the success in what he has done has not necessarily been out there in the public's eye. He's en route to become the legend that follows from being exceptional, different human being that we could define as having been a Beyonder.
Well, my takeaway from this is this exceptional quote. I love this. I've actually created a quote card of this while we were talking. It's now live on Bertie's profile. This quote says, "A Beyonder strives not to be the best in the world. He rather strives to be the best for the world." And I think that is my takeaway from today, Bertie. Thank you so much for spending time with me again today. I think as we unpack these concepts, it's really life-changing. And so for those that are watching right now, or you might be watching the replay afterwards, I would like you to share with us your takeaway from the talk today and post it below in the comments. If you have any questions, please post that as well. Bertie would be thrilled to answer your questions. And I'm looking forward to next week's talk, where we might start unpacking things that we might not have specifically talked about or dealt with before. Thank you so much, Bertie. I enjoyed it, and this concept of the legend, I think maybe we can think through it a little bit and maybe talk about it a little bit next week.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, and good day to everyone out there, and please be safe.